Yay. It's lighter out than last week. So as always, so Jill, she is on a beach in Florida with her daughter, which I said she should please not dial in to this. So I'm holding down the chair fort for this session. I goes without saying, I'm healthy, well, and vaccinated and tested and negative, but I'm very cautious. So I am wearing a mask because of a distant exposure. So I just want to make sure. That's why I'm that. I think we are all in person except Mary Beth, who decided to stay on the committee. Maybe dialing in, but we will, if she doesn't join in, then we still have a quorum, which needs to just be 6 of us. So officially, so just again, a couple housekeeping things, and we have a lot to cover as always. We are gonna set up tonight because we have presenters from the library and public safety. The budgets that we didn't cover at the end of our last session: street lights, streets and sidewalks, parking lots, the tree program, and dams. We are going to circle back to this evening, but we are going to first, because we have presenters here, we're going to start with Nikki and working on the library, and then we will go from there. Just two more pieces. But those are the ones that we will circle back on, and I don't think they will take quite as long, but we held ourselves to the time limit last week. In terms of, again, just when we do get to the fire and rescue and emergency medical, this is a question for the group that it's related to Andy and I, and whether the group, so Andy is on the firefight, he's a firefighter. On the on-call firefighting group and doing training for EMS. And so the question to the group is, when we get to those budgets, would you like Andy and I to recuse ourselves from voting on them because he also works there, or is everybody comfortable with us?
We can outvote you.
You can outvote us. Okay. So does everybody, do we have to do a formal vote on it, or is there?
Unless somebody calls for it.
Okay. So is everybody comfortable with us? Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Just wanted to get $1 million only for the on-call. Okay. That's again, just, and I think in terms of, there's a couple of questions that have been raised to me that I think will fold into the budget discussions. Some specific around the budget committee's role in asking about and inquiring and making budget decisions related to things like salaries, related to areas. Again, the way these are broken out, some salaries are lumped together if it's multiple groups, some are more individualized based on the number of individuals. So I think as we get to those, as questions come up, we'll spend some time talking about our role, how much we can scrutinize, really where our role ends. So I just wanted to just give voice to that before we start. Any questions before we kick off? Okay.
It's me?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, so let me share my screen. Bear with me just for a moment.
And for reference, this is Camden Public Library. It's on page 22 under tab 7.
Audra, we're still muted. I can't hear anybody. I'm not sure if anybody else can.
Oh, my apologies. Is that better?
Thank you.
Can you lower the line a little?
Absolutely.
You won't be able to. I'll run out the room and you don't want to do that.
Can I get rid of this box so I can do the presentation? How do I get rid of this
I'll,
box?
I think I have to be the one to move it. Or you can move it to the side. Or reduce it.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Except that it's still not doing, there it is.
And while Nikki's getting that set, and just because I'm a stickler for process, since we started 30 minutes early, our goal is going to be to end at 8:30. And that means that if we work things correctly, 8 o'clock will be no new budgets presented past 8. If it's not on the floor, then we can of course revisit if it's a minute over, but otherwise we'll just stick with that. Okay.
Okay, well, Good evening. I'm Nikki Mayonis. I'm the director of the Camden Library, and I'm here to talk a little bit about our budget, and I will be brief because I know you have a lot to do tonight. So let me start out with a brief synopsis of what we do. First off, we're open 7 days a week, and we're one of the few libraries in the state that is open 7 days a week. So what that means is we check out books and ebooks and movies every single day. And we offer programs for both kids and adults most days. We don't just wait for people to come to us, however. We do a lot of outreach. We go to visit classrooms, both private and public. We go to visit people in their homes who can't get out. We offer curbside delivery. And we offer such things as what we're doing right now. We're offering the AARP tax service so that people can come and have their taxes done 1 day a week during the months of February, March, and into early April. So that's just some of the things that we do, again, 7 days a week. So a little bit more on what we do. In 2022, we had 166,000 visits from our public. And I want to be clear that that's not 166,000 unique users. That's Camden using their library, sometimes on a monthly basis, sometimes on a bi-weekly basis, weekly, or even daily. We have lots of people who come in, who check in with us every day or every other day. Also in 2022, we offered over 1,200 adult and children's programs, and the combined audience for those programs was over 241,000 people. And that's because when COVID hit, we started offering programs virtually as well as on site. So when you have a big audience, and when you make it really convenient for people to attend programs, you get these kinds of numbers. So all of that data that I just talked about is what goes into making us a 5-star library. And you've probably heard around town that we're a 5-star library. And what that means is on a per capita basis, we stand among the highest per capita basis of any library in Maine. And there are only 85 5-star libraries in the entire country. And that really is because roughly 80% of Camden residents actually have a library card and use it. That's what makes us a 5-star library. So before I get into the budget, I wanted to give you just another couple of minutes of background because I think it's pertinent to this conversation. And this really is about the history of the library. More than 100 years ago, Mary Louise Curtis Bach bought the library site, the ground that the library sits on today, because she looked around and she knew that the library needed a permanent home. There was a hotel that burned down on that site, and she snapped that land up. A few years later, she instigated fundraising so that the library could actually be built. And of course, the library opened in 1928. During that same period of time, she was buying plots of land all up and down Atlantic Avenue because she also thought that it was going to be important for the library to be affiliated with some really spectacular parks. She was smart enough to hire 3 of the best landscape architects of her time, Fletcher Steele and the Olmsted Brothers, and of course that is today's amphitheater and Harbor Park. And those 2 parks were also given to the town, completely done. So the library and the 2 parks given to the town with the provision that they always be under the authority of a library board of trustees. So again, we've been on Main Street since 1928. We are stewards of the parks, and the original gifts called for oversight by the library board. So this slide is just something I threw in because I thought it was interesting. This is the view from Harbor Hill. Previous to 1928, previous to the library being built. All right, so now we get into the budget. This is the big picture of our budget. It's roughly half and half. You can see that donations, grants, fees, fundraisers make up about 51%, and the town of Camden 49%. And I should say, just to clarify, this is the proposed budget that we're talking about. So we're going to get down a little bit more into the weeds about income.
Is the ratio typically 40 in the 49, 51%, or how much is it varied?
It is. It varies a little bit. Some years it's 47%, some years it's 48. This year it's 49. So it's right in that approaching 50%. So to get down into the weeds a little bit about income, this is our income from fundraising. And again, this is what we propose to make during the course of fiscal year 2024, $195,000 in donations. And that's hard to do, particularly in the climate that we're in right now. Camden on Canvas, this will be our third year of that. We hope to bring in 50,000 there. Campaign for the Future at 75, the Harbor Arts shows, the book sales. So the total fundraising from this area of our budget would be $375,000. So next comes our income from endowment funds. The top two, the Maintenance Fund and the Curtis Trust, those are actually funds that Mrs. Bach herself set up for us, and the others have been set up, along the way. And we anticipate bringing in about just over $129,000 from endowment. We also anticipate bringing in better than $32,000 from amphitheater rental. That's weddings. And in this case, it will be the third year of those Bay Chamber concerts as well. And then other income, and that's a bunch of stuff. That's things like photocopies, we fax for people. It's bunches of little things adding up to over $38,000. So to kind of wrap this piece up, we are proposing that the town of Camden join us at $555,000, equaling again that $49,000 of our operating budget. This is an increase of 6%, and it does reflect the rising costs of utilities, health insurance, and staff. And I should say here that we, just like every other business and entity in the country, we have a difficult time retaining staff these days. So it's really important that they be assured that they are going to get some kind of increase. And we'll talk more about that when we get to expenses. So again, proposing income from the library resources. And when I say from the library, that's the trustees, it's staff, it's volunteers, it's donors, at just over $576,000, and total income from the town at $555,000, bringing the total income to just over $1 million, $1,131,069. And remember that figure, because we'll get back to that in a moment. So that's income. And any questions about income? I kind of ripped through that quickly. Nope. Yes.
So maybe do your microphone, just push one green, and then you're good.
Okay, one quick question. On the income portion the
Yes.
town supports, how does that compare with other towns in this area? Do you have any data you can give us?
In this area, I can say that Belfast and Rockland are both municipal libraries, and more or less fully funded by their towns. Although they have, friends of the library organizations that bring in, some of the extras, but they are more or less fully funded. Rockport is a little more similar to us, but they are more fully funded by their town than we are. They have an endowment that pays for a portion of their operation. So without, getting back, looking at statistics, that's all I can say for sure, but I am sure of what I've just said.
I'm
Nikki, I
curious,
actually looked into this.
with the with the COVID services like the curbside,
Yeah.
which I personally am very appreciative of. Is there more of a strain, or are there shifts in terms of what the staff and those requirements are? And I know from a technology perspective, there was a lot of keeping it accessible, hybrid. Or if you could speak to just what has shifted in terms of the needs and the budget impact there.
So those things are still shifting, because we're not really completely over COVID as yet. We continue to do curbside, and we will continue to do curbside for much of this year. But at some point, I do hope we can get back to normal. For instance, we open at 10, and pre-COVID, we opened at 9 a.m. And we open at 10 now so that we can do curbside. So it's things like that that I would like to see us continue to shift back to normal. And in terms of programming, we're kind of making our way through that. We are finding that programs on site are not very well attended. Pre-COVID, they were very well attended. So we're offering a lot of hybrid programming. And for some programs, we're offering them only on Zoom. And so again, we're kind of experimenting and seeing what our public really wants. Because, none of us have been here before. And we're kind of more knowledgeably making it up as we go along than we were, say 2 years ago. But we are really finding that things may never be what they were pre-COVID. People want different things, I think, than they did 3 years ago. We did just have a program on Saturday. Greg Marley came to do mushroom identifying, and we packed the picker room for that. Plus, we had 250 people on Zoom for that. But that's unusual. That really is. Many of our, as I said, our on-site programs, we're only seeing 20 people, whereas pre-COVID, we would see 50 or 60.
Hey, Nikki, and to the group, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I did back to the just question of contribution from the town for a library and how that looks in comparison to other towns. I did a bunch of research on this over the past week, and 50% contribution from the town across the country is the lowest of the low end. It's quite surprising. And I understand that the history here was a private citizen and then came back into the town. So, but I just want the frame of reference for everybody to know that the 50% contribution to the town or from the town for a library is something that I strongly believe we should be looking to increase in future years because we are on the very low side of that across the country.
Thanks, Will.
Thank you, Will. I can't argue with that.
And I believe, I mean, guys, I believe
The library to me, just anecdotally, is the heart of the town. I mean, the sight lines you have from the property, whether it be in the harbor or it's a community place for everyone to enjoy. I think this is a component that, a taxpayer receives all benefit. To hear that 80% of the town has a library card is incredibly reassuring. The taxpayer seems to love the library and the space, and especially the parks around the library. It's such a special place. I think that I am fully supportive of not only, I know Audra in the packet has reduced the budget by 5,000, but I forgetting about the nominal 5,000, I think that we as a town should be supporting in full our library's request. And I think in future years, we should be discussing increasing the percentage that we as a town commit to the library, so that we can become at least on par with, a municipal, a shared ownership, framework, as it relates to other towns across the country.
Well, Will, last year, if you had been on the committee, I think we actually ended up adding fiscal dollars to the initial request. Just to give you some of that history. And I guess the only follow-up question I then would have in terms of my prior question and Will's sentiment is, are there services like curbside, and I will move past it. Are there services that you, if not in this budget, in future budgets, that you would want to keep because it's a service that the community wants, but it would require, again, a rethinking, again, not necessarily for this budget, but for future.
Right. So we would be happy to keep curbside as it is if I felt that we could, fully return to normal open hours. So that would require a little more staff. The other thing that, Audra and I were talking about this right before the meeting, we really need to up our technology in terms of offering hybrid meetings and programs. It doesn't work all that well right now. And clearly, this is something that people really do want to see us continue with. I think it was last year, but it might have been the year before. Many of the committee said to me that they really enjoyed watching our programs while they were making dinner and, or right after dinner, that kind of thing. And they really loved, particularly in the winter, being able to be at home and still see something that was really of interest to them. And that it was, kind of a learning a thing for them. So last year, I do remember that you tried to increase the budget, but it didn't go through finally.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yes, it didn't.
Oh,
Yeah.
and also just to
Yeah.
put it out there, the 550 was a mistake that Nikki caught. So I was going to ask you all to change it to 555 because by the time we caught it, the budget books had already gone out, and I figured
So it's a flat,
it's easier to ask the budget committee to
555,000.
fix it than reprint and resend everything.
so when we do vote, it's going to be on the 555,000.
Yes.
That's on page 22. It's
Nikki,
Yes.
sorry, interject.
Go ahead, Will.
Oh, for the fundraising, you mentioned that given this climate, a good amount of your income, it's not committed per se. I know you requested 555,000, being at 48%. Would it, in any world, make sense if there were to be a motion put in place to grant the library funds in excess of 555,000 to increase, for the sole purpose to increase our town's percentage to the total budget of the library? Or do you think that would be unnecessary at that time?
Well, being asked that question, I've got to say honestly that this is a very tight budget, particularly given the donor climate that we are finding ourselves in. I am concerned that about whether or not we can actually make our goals simply because of what's happening with the stock market. So, I'll be perfectly frank with you. I believe in setting goals, and I believe that you do, your very best to make them. But what we are finding right now in terms of donations is that people are still giving. They're just not quite giving at the same level. And that's because they're feeling it, of course, at home as well. The other thing that I would say about the budget figures that I put together in January is that we're finding that the utility costs are hitting us even harder than I thought they would, particularly electricity. And I think everybody has probably seen that at home as well. If you ask me, I would love to have a little bit more room. This is a very tight budget. And we always budget tightly, but this is tighter than most, truly.
Has there ever been go ahead.
Well, it was just more, I had a question of my own ignorance when it comes to trusts and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I don't have money in a trust, so I'm not really sure how they work. Can you sort of explain, and it doesn't have to go into super detail, I'm just wondering, I'm assuming you're using interest off the trust as this, so is there a
Yes.
way to somehow, and I know they're all in separate categories, and I don't know how much is in each thing, because I'm assuming this is only showing us what you're going to be getting from the interest, but like to somehow, if you were to combine them, and I don't know if that can happen, or like put that money in the same account, would you be able to collect more interest on that, so you're getting more, or, I have no idea how to work, so I'm just curious as to what that interest is, and like, is there a way to have that work for the library more consistent?
Not to my knowledge, no. The trusts, the two original trusts were set up separately and must remain separate. The third one, which I think I don't have it right in front of me, is the Centennial Fund. Again, that's a separate deal. And then the two bottom ones, we were named in those wills. So, No, the answer is no. There's really no way to, to do better than we're doing. That's right.
Audra, is there anything in with the reliance on donation? Is there ever anything built into the Camden budget where if donation and contribution goals there's a miss on them, that there is, reserve or something that could be used to offset the service level needs? Again, because the hope is that you hit those goals, right? So I'm just curious, is there ever anything where it gets reassessed and looked at, and that if there's a shortfalling of X percent, that there's funding that can be put as that safety net? Or
No, I've never seen that done really. It tends to be just the sort of lump sum figure that you see in the budget is what it is.
Yeah.
Nikki, if you were to say, this is a tight budget, right? And I hear you in saying that. And so, and you heard my prior comments. What amount of money, 50,000 or so, do you think would, I guess, is there a gut check number that you say, this might put us in a little bit more comfortable position to understanding the climate that we're in?
I would say an additional, say, 25,000 would be exceedingly helpful. And
Okay.
I think realistic.
It'd be 580 grand.
are there any other questions on the floor too? Go ahead.
I don't want to sound as though I don't love the library, because I've loved
Yeah.
this library since I was a third grader.
Mhm.
But I mean, when we're talking about, when we're looking at this budget and we're saying, oh, well, the library has a tight budget.
Yeah.
So does
So does everybody.
everybody in this town for
Yeah.
the same reasons.
Yeah.
And is this the time when everybody's being hit with higher taxes, new assessments, high utility costs, high food costs, you name it, try and buy a used car? Is this the time to say, okay, let's take X amount of dollars and just plug it in without a place for it to go or a need that's being expressed, and let's just spread it out through the town to people that are already struggling?
Would you like to make a motion to move forward with the proposed budget that, and even last year when we voted on in excess, it didn't get adopted at the select board. Oh, go ahead.
Well, she just asked me if you have more to go, and I was just going to briefly talk about expenses, but
Okay.
If you don't want to hear it, that's
No,
okay.
no,
by
no,
me.
no, I absolutely.
Okay. So, all right. So let me just go through these very quickly. So here's the big picture of expenses. We break it down into 4 really big categories: building and parks, books, programs, and tech, staff, wages, of course, and background support. Here's the figure for building and parks, and that's, of course, all the needs of our building, including, maintenance, utilities, et cetera, and the park upkeep at almost 186,000. Here's the books, programs, and tech at just over 100,000. That's, of course, the paper books and the ebooks and the streaming services, programs and technology. Here's that staff wages. This is for 10 FTE again, so that we can staff the library 7 days a week. I did build in merit increases for all of our frontline staff because they truly deserve it, particularly in these days. And of course, we want them to stay. And then that last piece is what I'm calling background support. It's the health insurance, it's the liability insurance, it's the accounting and the bookkeeping. It's, things like the leases for our printers and photocopy machines, et cetera. So the figure that we are budgeting for expense is $1,131,069, the same figure that we are budgeting for income. And again, that's our model. We don't budget to make money. We don't budget to lose money. We budget to break even, and it's been a very successful model for us. Okay, so now I'm done.
Thank you, and I apologize for.
No problem.
So
By the way, they are blooming right now.
Go ahead, Peter.
So I've got a couple questions. First, can I ask what factors you use when generating some of these budget numbers? Like the health insurance premium, your increases to staff, if it was a standard increase or if you just did it individually. If it's individually, I don't want to know that.
So health insurance is, of course, it is the real figure. That changes for us at the end of the calendar year. So I can project from that. Staff wages, again, I build a figure in there for merit, and not everybody gets the same. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question. Right, but right. And what else are you wondering about?
I guess the other factors, I mean, the areas that that you mentioned, and I think that I've got another question for Audra at some point shortly after this is, your electricity was budgeted up only a small amount. So if you're contracted, that's great. If you're not, then I'm
Right.
concerned that you're under budgeting in some of these areas that are seeing 25 to 40% increases in.
So I budgeted it only a small amount up because we were hoping, we were told that the Siemens work would save us quite a lot in that area. And we haven't really been, we're just now completing a full year. So that was truly was my best guess, given what we were, the kind of work we did with the Siemens contract, as well as, trying to factor in what I was hearing and reading in the newspaper from CMP.
And other areas in facilities, it's just, again, that's an area that I know from the schools is just, the increases have been astronomical, much more than any other area. of the
So,
service sector.
and when you say that, you mean facilities, you mean repair work, or do you mean cleaning work?
Maintenance contracts have been up a great deal, and then just
So our maintenance
laborers.
contracts, these are real figures for our maintenance contracts, and we budget that figure every year. Not every year. We've been increasing it, in small amounts every year, based on repairing small things that come up over the course of the year. And we do have a small kind of emergency fund, if you will, for something larger, which you actually you don't actually see on this. It's in the neighborhood of it's between $50,000 and $60,000, and that's our emergency facility fund.
Well, that was my next question for Audra. If that was actually allowed to have some kind of capital reserve fund, which could it be used for energy costs? So to address some of the other concerns, so it sounds like there might be a reserve fund available if your energy costs or facility
Well,
costs were higher than.
that reserve fund really is for repairs,
Okay.
For emergency repairs. Honestly, I start looking very, very closely at where we are with the budget this month. And I do projections to, forecasts. And we do the very best we can to make sure that we don't go in the red, and we don't. So we do what's necessary so that we don't go in the red. That's what I believe.
So I guess the last is to Audra. Is there a mechanism that the town could set aside a reserve for energy that wouldn't commit it to the budget, but might be available in an emergency?
Do you mean for the library or
If-
for?
I
Because
guess maybe it could be-
we do have a reserve fund for, I forget what we call it. It's energy efficiency, something.
It could be used for that instance just to address some of the needs or the concerns that came up already.
Yes, it could be.
And maybe we can hold that for on that capital reserve. Yeah, because I would think more, not just local for the library, but across the different, the different services. So any other questions? Go ahead.
Small, minor, but I noticed, obviously back when we were talking about the Opera House.
Yeah. All right. We were talking about the Opera House. Dave recently put in for his budget, the janitorial services. They have them here as well. Have we as a town thought about combining some sort of, I don't know if we'd be able to get a better deal or if that's contracted to see if, I mean, and I'm, if in the municipal buildings, if that the town funds, if there's a way to get, I mean, I don't know if it would make that much of a difference, but I was just curious.
We've never looked into it to my knowledge, and I don't know how that would
The only
work.
reason we haven't is because this is the first year we've had like a contract cleaning service for in this building. But I do think that, going forward, if we stick with that model, Nikki and I we always look for opportunities to
Sure, yeah.
save costs wherever we can.
And if you're happy with them, absolutely.
Any other
Yeah.
questions on the floor? Or I see Mary Beth, you and Will are two Zoomers. So any other questions before we see if anyone wants to call a motion?
I move that we approve the $555,000 request for the library.
Great. Any seconds?
Second?
Okay, so in the room first, all in favor? And then moving to Zoom, we have Will Addis. You just got to unmute.
Yes.
And Mary Beth Thomas.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Hey, before we, I had a quick comment, before we, and maybe it's kind of a question, and I don't intend to go backwards to last week, but I did look at the planning, I started to, I think I kind of mumbled it last week, but you had mentioned that you had accounted for an 8.7% increase in wages across the, various departments. And I looked at last year in the planning, code enforcement, community development, and assessing, the fiscal 23 budget last year was 432,700. This year that we approved is 495,000. That's a 14% increase.
Mhm.
And as I heard from Jeremy, there's no intention of hiring. So I'm wondering why we're seeing a 14% increase there. Because if it was 8.7 or 9%, that total would be 470,000, not 495,000.
So the percentage increase doesn't always equate to the wage increase of the overall budget in that particular department.
But so I thought you had said that we're seeing an 8% increase in wages.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. For some budgets, that's going to show up as higher, and for some, it's going to show up as lower, depending on what all the other expenses are.
Audra, if I can also add, Will, we also have step increases that will be in FY '24. We have 3 employees that are going to be merit increases. Plus, I believe we have a new full-time position that's budgeted for FY '24 when in FY '23, I believe it was part-time.
Or it was only part of the year of that full-time position. Is that right, Jody?
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
what, so Will, the question you're trying to,
I wish that was
go ahead.
it's just discouraging that the way in which it's presented is not, the way in which it was summarized is not actually how it's budgeted. The line item is full-time wages. We were presented that there will be an 8.7% increase in wages. And we're now seeing in this particular line item a 14% increase. And there's nothing else baked into it, it's just full-time wages. And so it would be great to have understood prior to voting on this last week that there's merit increases, there's a part-time to full-time. Frankly, I trust you, Audra, that these numbers are accurate, but in seeing something that is double, I'm now going through every particular department to see what the actual increase is. Because it doesn't feel like what we're being presented. And then coupled with that, the comment that we learned last week that half of our budget is unused. I mean, the management of our funds from the taxpayer.
Will, that's half of that's the unassigned.
Very discerning, I'll say.
That's the unassigned fund balance that they were talking about, Will. That's not half our budget.
Our budget, to me, is around 11 mil.
Yeah, but that's
Annual budget.
not half of the annual budget is unused.
Okay, so what was the 4.6 then?
The 4.6 million was the unassigned fund balance. So that's money that isn't budgeted for any specific purpose.
Okay, so it's not as unused, it's just not appropriated to a particular item?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so sorry, I misunderstood that.
Yeah.
But it's, so I apologize for that. But back to the planning and land, I mean, you go to the Opera House. You know, by them hiring a cleaning contractor, it artificially wages look low, but then when you put in 26 grand, it actually means that wages, if you include that contractor as a wage, you know, as an employer, you know, call it, it's a 10% increase, which is closer to the 8.5%. But, you know, it's, anyway, I want to bring that up to the group. It's just something that I was looking at in between this week and last week. And I think we just need to do a better job at explaining to one another what we are actually looking at in the budget. And it might make sense to, you know, take the time to see if we are seeing this particular, you know, increase in wages. And I agree it should be equitable, but when I look at it between departments, from what I'm looking at, it doesn't look equitable. Anyway, I'll stop there.
Can I ask a quick question? I think, if I recall from 2 weeks ago when we were talking to Jeremy initially, and maybe in particular, maybe with this half-time to full-time position, wasn't there generating of income in that department? Doesn't that income, so it might be, so the expenditure increase might increase, but the tax impact is offset by the revenue increase. Is that
There's
fair?
there's a bunch of things going on in that department that make it so that when you add everything up, you aren't gonna get 8.7% for that department. You know, there's the fact that we brought on the new planner last year, and I think we only budgeted for a portion of that salary for the year because we knew it was going to take us time to advertise, you know, recruit, get somebody on board. So we knew going into that year, we wouldn't use that entire salary that we had. You know, we wouldn't have to budget for a full salary for the full year because it would be some months into the year before that full-time position was hired for. So there was that. There's the fact that Carrie Leishman used to be a contract employee who was actually an employee of the town of Rockport. And so he came over to Camden as well. So that's another full-time position that's showing up in that budget. And it's showing up for the first time for the full year in FY24. And, you know, we do have merit-based step increases in addition to the cost of living adjustments. So, you know, when I went through the presentation at the very beginning to say this is sort of the overall budgetary increases and this is the overall drivers of it being wages, saying there's the 8.7% COLA on top of, you know, the other sort of merit-based step increases. And this is what the, you know, what the impact looks like on the budget from a percentage point. It isn't going to equate to 8.7% in every single department for different reasons.
And will,
I don't know if we have a vote on it. I don't know if we have any ability to this order, but in multinational corporations that I've worked for and startup companies that I've worked for, if you get a merit-based increase, that is also included in your cost of living. You wouldn't get both.
I guess the way that we have a pretty rigid scale as to how we do that, and it's very difficult to change it. And it takes, you know, we just can't be as flexible to the labor market with the way that our personnel policy is set up. So that's how we've been able to adjust for it year after year, unless we do sort of big adjustments to our step and grade plan each year. And we just got done with like a 3-year, a 3-year program of adjusting the whole step and grade plan throughout the entire municipality. And then the labor market completely changed again. So I guess that's kind of what I'm up against with wages.
So let me propose this, and Will, I don't know if you were on the meeting yet when I kind of did my fun initial housekeeping, because the question about, the role of the budget committee in assessing individual salaries in terms of where is that line? I'm glad you raised it again. I'm in agreement with you that, like you, we're trying to reconcile what were we instructed in the beginning, what was kind of some of the introductory summaries that we were given. And then, if you're, we're on this committee, so we're cross-checking and trying to see how that aligns. I want to propose, because again, I think it's come up in a number of ways where some salaries you can kind of scrutinize because they're individual line items, others are bulked together. Does it make sense? Again, not for the sake of pushing forward for these other budgets, but to revisit, and I don't know if Audra, maybe we come back together next week as part of it, of just kind of a review of kind of how those salaries, just an overview of kind of how they are assessed. Because I know what you had shared was that one number, and I also understand, again, across each department, it's not always apples to apples. So I don't know if it's a matter of having that in the initial presentation, set forth kind of the questions that Will has, and we're not expected to go back and scrutinize as everything 8.7. There's more nuance than that. I don't know how others feel about it. If we kind of circle back to that as, I'm not kicking it down the road, but circle back to it as, this is how the salaries, revisit that subject line essentially, so that, it's restated or clarified. And then that also combines with what our role as a budget committee is in providing input, oversight, and scrutiny to those versus the department heads and so on. I don't know how others feel about, go ahead.
I know years ago, we used to have our first meeting at the end of February, the last Thursday of February, so that the town manager could do exactly what you're talking about. She could do he at that time could do the details and, the things that we are going to be looking at that we may or may not understand. I think that might be very helpful if people here have never worked on town budgets before, to have one meeting that in the beginning that's just a presentation by Audra, and then we'll understand what we're looking at when we go home and read our books.
Any other comments on the floor for?
Can I ask a question?
Oh yeah, go ahead, Mary Beth.
I'm sorry, because I came and I haven't, don't have history, and some of you have been on the budget committee for years. And I want to just understand more. How is it common that this group kind of disagrees and there's some kind of spirited discussion about this? And is that like encouraged? Is there a lot of, or is it a lot of just approving what's presented? I really appreciate what Will brought up. That's like very important. And I think the budget committee should be looking at with great, scrutiny and whatever. I spent a lot of time this past week looking at the budget. And I just want to know, what has been like the tenor of this group? Has that been part of what you've done, or has it been more kind of approving what's presented? And how does this group handle that kind of situation? I'm interested in the process. Obviously, I'm a social worker and you understand the process. So if you could clue me in, I really appreciate it.
Well, I think, it's perfectly appropriate to talk about it generally from a service level, like we were saying before. When it's not appropriate is sort of drilling down to, yes, I guess like anything that's a personnel responsibility, which is setting the compensation for employees and setting, how we go about that. But I think that on a service level, it's a perfectly appropriate discussion for the budget committee to have.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Going back to the planning budget, I mean, I wasn't confused or bothered by that number at all, because I realized Carrie's, the assessor's salary is now in there as a full-time thing. It's also getting a rebate back from Rockport, so figure that one out. And you had a person who came on as a full-time employee, not a part-time employee, a full-time employee, but only for part of the year. And this year it's a whole year. That's
Yeah.
just wasn't
That's where
confusing to
that's
me.
where I'm trying to reconcile, right? Like if in the beginning, and that's why, again, I want to be able to be, honor the conversation we're having, but like in that introductory presentation, if Audra if you had not said, we're looking at an 8.7% increase, and Will, I'm kind of looking at the Zoom screen, so you're probably seeing the side of my head. I just think, right, if that, to me, I'm with you, in terms of who's come on and like, the ebbs and flows of how those pieces fit together. I am in agreement that I wasn't trying to look at that 8.7%, but because it was said, I think, is that really the piece, Will, that you're raising in terms of like, you said one thing and now it's different? I'm not, Audra, and I hope it's,
Well,
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, yes and no. As I think about the rebate from Rockport, I'm thinking just simply rather, what is our expense? I'm not thinking about income from Rockport right now, because that's, off to like our expense that we have to, as a taxpayer or as a town, pay for. And as I see a 14% increase, and then I hear about a personnel policy, I'd love to hear about what is a merit increase? Who's eligible for a merit increase?
Well, this
Is
is,
that restricted?
so I'm gonna jump right in because that
I don't know
is
what
all
the
not
committee's,
budget committee. And I think if you,
role is in
Yeah.
respect to the personnel policy, but when I start to, I think that being equitable is the most important component of wages. And I think it's not only, people who are the higher salary town employees, frankly, don't need it as much as the lower, the more entry level, lower paid salary employees. So I would.
Hey, Will.
Hey, Will, Will, again, I think
Audra was
oh, go ahead, Will, yeah.
And she was trying to interject, so I.
Yeah.
What you're
Yeah.
talking about has nothing to do
So,
with.
all of you have a lot to get through. Your job is really important, but this is, the personnel stuff that you're talking about, Will, is completely separate from what the budget committee's responsibility is.
Great, but what's not separate is when I look at a 14% increase in wages, right? Because that's what we voted on, we approved.
Well, okay, so I want to make this very clear. What I was talking about when I did sort of my initial, these are the driving factors in what's increasing the budget. I said it was wages. And the biggest component of that driving factor was the 8.7% COLA. Because that is the big thing if you look at all wages. Cost of living adjustment.
It's breaking up a little bit. So, let's see if the internet comes stable. So again,
Can we circle back and move on?
so I was just gonna say, first, for the sake of reconciling the percentage that Audra mentioned in the beginning, and then what gets baked into the what is in the budget for employee wages is COLA plus, which again, I think we need to clarify, and we want to make sure we're giving time to, but again, I would like to be able to proceed with moving forward with police department unless there's other objections. Does that?
Top. I think it makes sense, on that much difficult conversation, we should have it, we should be shying away from it. As I'm processing information and conversations that we're having, I think that we should be reducing.
Point of order.
I think 8.7 costings across the board.
Point of order.
Yeah. Hey, Will.
I'm seriously considering.
Hey, Will, first of all, I will say I am in the epicenter of never shying away from any challenging conversations, but out of respect for the entirety of the budget process. Again, I don't know if you were on the call in the beginning. I know clarifying our role as regards to wages and salaries is something that has come up. So we're not dismissing it. It's an important piece of it, but we can come back together with maybe more cohesive information and dive into that further, but still allow us to proceed with the budget, because there are components that are outside of our role. And so I would,
As long as we come back to it, and as long as we still come back to, you know, doing an independent climate study, like we spoke about last time, and then I'm totally for that, but, you know, so that we can keep moving forward with other stuff. But I do think that this is, you know, time and well invested on our part, that we owe it to our town to revisit this.
I hear you. I recognize it. It'll be reflected in the minutes. It'll be reflected on, you know, again, with those that are also watching. And I also would like to move forward. Does anybody disagree?
I think
Okay.
there's a process for us to reopen previous votes.
Yeah.
And this is,
And that's true. Yeah. Before we conclude our session as a budget, we can go back and reopen votes that we previously went through. So at the end of our sessions, we can also have an opportunity to do that if there's things that are outstanding. Okay. All right.
Great, thank you.
All right. So we are going to police department.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Nikki.
Randy up. Okay, great, thank you. I just got to find you.
Doing a great team.
Randy told me he was gonna talk for.
yeah, I was going to say, Chief
Yeah,
Farley
watch
just
out.
asked me to take an hour nap time. Thanks, Karen.
But I promise I was moving on, but is it a true statement, Audra, as you proceed with the rest of these budgets, that we should not be looking to see solely an 8.7% wage increase across each department across the board? Is that a true
Correct.
statement? Okay,
Correct.
okay. Got it. All you.
Well, I'm here to represent the police department once again. It's my yearly date with all of you people to ask for a good amount of money. You've all got copies of my PowerPoint. I can bore you to death and read through it, or you can ask me the highlights that you might have. I can give you a basic rundown of our staffing. Currently, we are down 3 patrol positions due to the retirement of Kurt Andrick, who took the chief deputy's job at Knox County. Brooke Hartshorn, who was another long-term employee, 20 years, took a $6 an hour more to start job with Thomaston Police Department. She's trying to get her highest 3/4 in because she's getting towards retirement age. And then I had another officer who took the school resource officer's job in Belfast. Fortunately and unfortunately, we train our staff very well to a very high standard, so they are highly recruitable. Our officers are getting recruited on a daily basis by other agencies that are offering them cars. They're offering them higher dollar per hour to start. Keeping employees is tough. Recruiting employees nationwide. We've been stealing from each other right around here in the Knox County area for quite a long time. We've come to respect each other for who can give the better offer to somebody. Losing my detective sergeant, who'd been with me for 20 years, was quite a loss. Fortunately, I put it out to all the officers in the department if anybody was interested. Nobody was interested in that position. Aaron Bailey, a retired detective, school resource officer for Brunswick Police Department, who was working with the Watershed Association, had asked me about a job, and I thought that was a great position for him to come in. The staff all agreed that that would be a great addition to us, and we hired him. We have 2 other patrol sergeants, along with the detective sergeant. I have a lieutenant, 6 patrol officers when we are fully staffed. We've been working at that deficit staffing for quite some time. I've got 1 position I haven't been able to fill for over a year. I just won't hire anybody off the street. We want the right person. We want the job to be right for them.
and we want them to be right for the position with our department. That's the staffing. Any questions on that? Our hours of operation. Yeah, go ahead.
The figure that we see here for full-time wages and everything, is that for a full-time
Full
staff?
staff, yes.
So,
Yes.
okay.
We're open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The administrative office is 7:30 to 4. There's a phone in the lobby to call down to the dispatch center at Knox County. They supply our dispatch service. That's available 24 hours a day if somebody needs service. I'm going to race through this, Madam Chair, if that's okay. Our officers work 4 on 4 off schedules. Administration and Detective Sergeant work a 4 and 3 schedule. Either the lieutenant or I are on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The patrol sergeants are eligible for call out if needed as well. I have an administrative assistant and a parking enforcement officer who also will serve other functions such as an animal control officer. I have him taking the EMT course right now. He will be our downtown summer person, highly visible. He's going to be managing the parking, metered parking plus parking on the street. Figure if we can have an EMT down in the downtown area 5 days a week, that's a plus for everybody, faster response.
Is it fair to say that because you've had that vacancy for an FTE, that's where the overtime is taking the bigger hit, or?
It will, but we can backfill that with some of the money from hourly wages. I'm getting onto the overtime slide now. I'm trying to keep the overtime at 55,000 again this year, but I'm already about 3,800 backwards because with the wage increase, that'll reduce me about 81 hours of overtime. So I'm already at deficit over what I was projecting. Last year, we took on doing some lake patrol because there was a need for some law enforcement out there. The Watershed Association, which Aaron was working for, they have somebody who does patrol, but they do not have law enforcement powers. We used to do that through the department many, many years ago, but it was a violation of our union contract because that was eligible patrol time for our officers. Ken Bailey did it. Everybody loved Ken. He did a fascinating job out there. When Ken retired from the Lake Association, I removed that from the police department unless we were going to be the ones supervising it, because my supervisors were all subject to vicarious liability. If there was a reserve officer out there doing patrol, sometimes we wouldn't get called. My supervisors wouldn't know. Ken had a great relationship. The Lake Association would call him if there was an issue. He'd go out and address it. But liability-wise, it would come back on our supervisors and myself included. So it was a better fit to take that out. Since that time, Justin Twitchell served in that capacity. He was a deputy sheriff investigator who had law enforcement powers, so the Lake Association had somebody there. Aaron had retired, was no longer a police officer at that time. So when asked, I believe it was the board that mentioned it, we ought to see if we could spend some time. We had a boat that belonged to the police and fire department that really wasn't being utilized. My wife, who's the Parks and Recreation manager, called me one day and said, "Hey, I need to be able to get out to the island to put buoys and floats and stuff out and check the picnic areas out there. Who's got a boat?" And I said, "Well, I know where there's one. There's one sitting up at the wastewater." And I talked to Audra, and it was at that time we just started discussing the need to get officers back out at the lake. So we did training with the Warden Service. Scott was my ticket officer at the time, was a licensed captain and was certified in teaching maritime safety. So we did training with the Warden Service. Some of us had already been Coast Guard boat trained in the department. The officers worked weekend patrols out there, tried to do 4 to 8 hours, Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays. If it was a Monday holiday, they would roll in and try to pull that in as well. You'll see in the budget later on that I did pay for that out of the overtime line from last year. I can't do that again this year. Trying not to jump too far ahead, Sarah. I just think I've covered the Inland Harbor Master. We concentrated on voluntary compliance and violations out there this year. It was very well received by the boating public. We didn't have to issue any citations. We offered life jackets. I did some patrols on my days off. Took my wife out to the island so she could check the picnic tables and things like that. We got to spend a little time together while we were working. If you've been married for 38 years, that's how you get a date in every once in a while. No OUIs, which was great. Warden Service worked a few details out there with us. They thought it was an asset. We actually, Joan Garrigan let us leave our boat out there at the lake, so we had ready response if we needed to. We functioned staying in the boundary waters of Camden, but obviously if there was an emergency on any part of the lake, we would respond to that. The Warden Service was told that if they needed a boat in case of an emergency, our boat was there, and we would we'd let them use that. So for the first year, it was great. Like I said, no violations. We talked to a few people about life jackets and registrations and things like that, but overall, the compliance and the acceptance of us being out there was great. This year, I'm going to be hiring 3 new officers. I am fortunate enough, I have a young man who is getting out of the United States Air Force around May 15th. Served 4 years in the Air Police, who is interested in coming to work for us. I have a young man, local family, who is graduating with a bachelor's degree in May. He's interested, and I have a young man who's currently a corrections officer at the Two Bridges Jail who's looking to come on with us. They're all in their early 20s. What I'm looking for is I have a group that is, some of us old guys are over in their 50s now with over 30 years. I have some that are getting into the 20 years, but I'm looking for that next generation of long-term employees that are going to come up through and hopefully are going to stay with us and make Camden PD a career move for themselves. That being said, they have 0 experience in Maine law enforcement, so I will have to train them in what's called the pre-service online academy, and then they have to go to 2 weeks of hands-on to become reserve certified. Then it's phase 3, which is on-the-job training for 80 hours with us, and then once they are hired full-time, they'll have a year to complete the 18-week municipal county basic police school, or the basic law enforcement training program now. And that costs about $3,000 per officer. That doesn't include wages. There's a series of uniforms that they're going to need. We're going to need to equip them with ballistic armor, sets of uniforms for the academy, uniforms for patrol. The costs are pretty high. It's at least $10,000 to $12,000 per officer to get them going. Yes, sir.
Randy, we brought this up last year, and I'm just curious as to how you and Audra get to decide that we need 3 new officers when the community desires, and we've spoken about this is the amount of different kinds of substance abuse and different kinds of mental issues that we've had to deal with. And these other communities in Maine have a resource recovery officer.
Can you give me a chance to finish my presentation, because I'm going to address that.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Thank you.
So the 3 officers would get us to the level of service that we have had since the late 90s. That would bring, we're not adding any new police officers at all. We are just filling the voids that we have had. The largest percentage of our budget, 93.3, is personnel cost, and that leaves 6.7% for operational. We just negotiated a successful contract with the union. We did that in-house without having to bring outside litigation in, which is a savings to the town. That agreement is good till 2025. The wages are set by that contract. When we are fully staffed and budgeted, I can't even see that slide. We have the proper funding. I don't see any need for us to add any additional officers if we get back to where we have been service-wise. We offer 3 tiers of service. We're able to do that because of adequate staffing. My officers right now are working 12-hour shifts to cover the voids. I also have the luxury of being able to use Rockport officers to backfill. Any overtime is offered to our officers first, and if that doesn't happen, and they've just worked too much overtime, then I can bring resources in from Rockport and vice versa. As you know, I probably should have said in the beginning, I am the chief for both Camden and Rockport. There is about a 60-40 split for my wages between the two towns, and that's based on population. I talked about the years of service. Last year, we had 5,610 calls. And Sarah, you had questions last year about things, and I'll see if I can read it, and maybe it shows up bigger on the next one, Jody, if you could, the calls for service. So that's a breakdown of the 5,610. You can see what we handled for calls. I don't know if you can blank that screen out with everybody, Jody, because we can't see the page one.
Or I can move it.
Yeah.
I'm not, what is it you need?
Yeah,
Randy?
no, I think you're good there. Audra fixed it. So if you have any questions about any of the things we issued, I mean, 911 hangups, agency assists, you can read the whole gamut of what we did. And I won't spend a lot of time on that unless you've got questions. Community programs, we have the Good Morning program where we call individuals in Camden and Rockport every morning to make sure that they're okay. If we don't hear from them, we send an officer to check on those people. And that has resulted in finding a couple of our participants in dire straits and probably saved their lives over the years. Sand for seniors, we'll take a bucket of sand to any senior who might need one. Officers have even spread the sand out so they don't have to walk out and take the risk of falling down. Unwanted medication collection, we offer boxes in both Camden and Rockport to take those, and we'll have an unwanted medication collection at the end of April. The date, I think we just posted that up. We do resident fingerprinting. We also do employment. If somebody works in the town of Camden and needs fingerprinting done. We did look into laser fingerprinting, digital service. That's about $18,000. I can't justify doing that. But if we got into fingerprinting for and charging for it at some point, we may look at doing that. Grants, last year we did fairly well. Mid-Coast Council on Government gave us a $38,119.27 grant, and we used that to upgrade all of our mobile data terminals in our cruiser to state-of-the-art patrol PCs, and it also paid to have the department's server upgraded. We used every bit of that money. We also took a grant from the Bureau of Highway Safety to go to e-ticketing from our cruisers. So now we can issue tickets right from our mobile data terminals. They're transmitted automatically to the Violations Bureau, so there's no longer bringing in the receipt and mailing them in. That was probably going to be an unfunded state mandate when they said, yeah, we're not going to do paper tickets anymore. So we got ahead of it and got them to pay for the printers. Briefly, I'm not asking for a vehicle this year. We have been trying to go towards hybrid vehicles. Currently, we have 2 gas-electric hybrids, which serve us well. The Select Board has expressed a desire for us to go to all-electric vehicles. Unfortunately, this year, because of supply and demand, we were only able to get a gas-optioned Ford Police Interceptor. And so I'm going to skip this year because 2024 Chevrolet says they have a Police Interceptor that's full electric that I'll be looking into. I did speak with Audra that those vehicles are probably going to be a third more than what we're currently spending. So we probably should put some money away in a reserve to offset that expense for next year. And I believe you put 30,000. Yes. Still working with Rockport. One of the big things we did together was we did an upgrade of our policies. All of the Camden and Rockport Police Department policies match. They are all to Maine Police Accreditation standards now. That was a 2-year project. Camden paid for the first half, Rockport paid for the second. Those policies have been implemented. The officers have been trained and signed off. They've been uploaded onto the DocuServe for Maine Municipal. So the officers can go in, review, sign off, and test, or test and sign off. And we try to do a review of our policies every year with everybody, all staff members. So we all stay current. And these are the latest upgrades of any of these policies. And we'll work with Durgo Safety if there are any policies that are upgraded, they'll send those to us so we can get those implemented as soon as they come out. Bicycle patrol is in my budget this year for $16,000. Audra and I had discussed this earlier. There's a desire by the select board to have officers go back to doing bike patrol. Bike patrol is not as simple as just buying a bicycle and putting an officer out there. It becomes expensive. If you want to go to e-bicycles, I think they're around $4,500 per bicycle. You can get a regular 18-speed police bike. I got that on the next slide. There's a breakdown. Those are about $1,299. In order to run a bicycle patrol, you're basically starting another small division in the department, because if you're going to put an officer on bicycle, their response is limited to a smaller geographic area. They can't carry the amount of equipment that you carry in a cruiser. We carry an AED. We carry lots of other equipment for safety, for accident scenes. If you put an officer on a bicycle and they make an arrest, unless we're going to spec banana seats on a bicycle, it's kind of hard to transport a prisoner. So you've got to have somebody else. So if we're going to go down that road, we need to train our officers properly. Sometimes there's training in Maine. Sometimes we have to send them out of state. We'd be looking to probably train 4 officers. They have to have a whole different setup for gear, clothing, the bicycles. I'm not a bicycle guy, so they need to be set up individually for the officer. I think 2 officers of similar stature probably can ride the same bike. They might have to adjust the seats or something. But if you get shorter officers like myself, you're not going to be able to ride the same bike as somebody else.
Is this environmental driven, or is it community, bring the officers into a more personal?
I have
I'll
not-
have questions later.
I have
like,
not had that
Peter's.
discussion with the board myself. Audra might be able to. I think it's a visibility thing. It's a great thing if you have full staff.
Is it seasonal too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you have full staff and you can, as long as you've got somebody that can respond to, yes, you could ride a bicycle back to the station, but if there's a domestic that's out on Molyneux Road, do you want to wait for somebody that's going to ride up the bicycle to get to the car? Because
Yeah.
you're not going to ride the bicycle.
And-
So
and-
it does cut back on response time.
Yeah.
Now, back on the slide where it showed what we had done. We had done over 100 foot shifts last year. That's really not a great number, because I only allow them to draw 1 complaint a day. So we don't, every officer who did a foot shift could have technically on that day drawn a complaint. I don't want to inflate the numbers. So 100 is just showing that day that they issued. So you might have had the day officer down on foot for a while, afternoon and the evening officer. So 3 officers would have done different foot shifts at different times, but they're only going to generate 1 number for that day.
Yeah. And I'll dive into it deeper when I think along Peter's line of questioning, because again, I'm really excited to see that community liaison officer. I want to dive into more of what policing looks like now versus in the 90s. But I'm just curious how the biking policing, how that plays into that. I don't know. Yeah.
I don't have the answer to that question. I know that bicycle patrol is a great visual thing for people to see when they come into town. Yes, they can get more places in the downtown geographic area on a bicycle. When officers work foot patrol, they can park a car so they're close to their car if they need to respond to something. That's what we have been doing. When we did bicycle patrol back in the 90s, we always hired a summer officer who worked both foot and bicycle patrol in the downtown area, 8 to 10 hours a day. And we had bicycle officers that were trained on staff so they could switch roles if needed.
Does anybody else want to dive into just why in terms of budget for, anyway, go
I had a
ahead.
question about that, but I wanted.
Yeah. Okay. We'll keep going. Sorry.
Okay, so I'm going to get into the support services, which is what
Okay.
you're going.
Right.
So this, if you will let me digress a little here to tell a story, I would appreciate it, because I think it drives the importance of this home. So in 2021, then Sheriff Tim Carroll and I started talking about servicing those with drug abuse, alcohol abuse, mental health issues in our community better. Our police officers were responding to these calls pretty much nonstop. People in crisis. And both of us said at the time, we're not getting the services from partner agencies that we should be getting, and it's getting pretty much dropped in the lap of municipalities and police departments to deal with. It's terrible. You go down to the hospitals and you see the emergency rooms full of people, sometimes out in the hallways because they don't have the staff, they don't have the services available or the space available. So when you don't have space for somebody that's in mental health crisis, say they're functioning in mental health crisis, and I don't even know if that's the right way to say that, they are not exhibiting a danger to themselves or a danger to others at the time, but they have some mental health issues that need to be addressed. So say they went down and they got evaluated and then they got released and then they go back home. Well, our part was pretty much over then because maybe we had done our part. But we needed to do more because it was getting into other things. It was spiraling into, maybe there was a domestic because of it or something like that. So we were having more contact. So we said, what could we do? So we started batting the idea around. Sarah asked about it last year and we were just in the starting stages of it. Well, it hasn't gotten any better and COVID made it even worse. So Tim had been working with Volunteers of America when he was at the sheriff's office, because Volunteers of America has a contract with the Knox and Waldo County Sheriff's Department to have crisis response officers to go on these calls. Well, I actually witnessed this firsthand when we got called to an emergency situation for mutual aid for Waldo County in Lincolnville. Could have been very bad, could have turned into a barricade. It was a person who was intoxicated, who had access to weapons, wasn't going to come out for anybody. So we first responded. Waldo showed up at the same time. And first thing I heard out of the officers, these are officers who'd never worked together, but they had all taken crisis intervention team training at some point. First thing they were like, we need to de-escalate this right now. Well, for a top manager to sit there and say, hey, these guys are already communicating this stuff that they learned. They brought it down. Waldo called for their community response person to start that way. The officers talked to the person, made contact. They were able to get her to come outside. The community liaison shows up, was successful. They took her to Penn Bay. He rode in the ambulance with her. And it brought that situation from up here down here. One, because they had the training. Two, because they started working together and formulated a plan. Three, because they brought that person in. And I was like, wow, this is the thing that we need. So Tim, as you know, went from being sheriff to being the chief in Rockland. So it kind of got sidetracked a little, but then we got back onto it this summer once he got established in his new role, because there was still a need there. So in about October, Audra, Tom Luttrell, and John Duke, Tim and I met, and we started discussing the need for this. And we also talked about, not only the need for the police, but there's need for general assistance. There is need for people who come in to need somebody that can point them into services that, we might not be able to think about, that have the time to do that because that's what their function is. So Tim had suggested VOA. So we started talking with them. Great people to work with. They actually talked to both sheriffs about giving Camden, Rockport, and Rockland some time each week where they could have somebody come in and start riding along with our officers. Stephen Brimley, the diversion and deflection coordinator, came in for his first ride with Camden PD on a Wednesday. And we were dealing with a serious situation of an elderly veteran with mental health issues who had been evicted from her apartment. The rental company had gone to court, lawfully and legally had evicted this person, and wanted us to enforce their writ of possession. I believe it was on the 23rd of December. Writ of possession means that they have gone and they've done the process and they want their property back. My officer who responded said, Chief, what are we going to do? I said, we're going to kick this down the road until Monday because I need to think about this and we need to find out what we can do. I won't name the agencies, but our partner agencies were contacted. We didn't get a call back. And we were needing to deal with this. I talked with Audra. I talked with Bill Kelly. I talked with their attorney. And we had some conversations. I'll leave it at that. The town made a generous offer to get this person back with their back rent paid, with an agreement that that person could keep tenancy. Still weren't getting help from our partner organizations, but Volunteers of America stepped in and they started looking for services. Well, it got to the point where negotiations that the town had offered weren't going to satisfy them, and they wanted the writ enforced. I got till the middle of February. There is the law, there is the spirit of the law, and there's human compassion. I am not going to put an elderly veteran with mental health issues out in the cold. Do I have the right to do that? No. I'll go to court if I need to explain that. I think they'd find it in my favor. We worked together with Volunteers of America, with the town's general assistance. We were able to get this person a hotel room while Volunteers of America worked on getting permanent placement for her. That was going along, and during the process, we found out that probably what had happened is she has terminal cancer that has affected her brain. She had fallen through the cracks. She had subsidized rent. Subsidy was being paid. She just forgot to re-up her portion of the rental agreement. A younger me would have enforced the law when it was supposed to. Well, I've been around a little while, and I've learned a few things over the years. You can't do that. You can't treat people like that. And we owe it to our citizens who are suffering mental health, drug and alcohol abuse better than what we are giving them now. The price for a person for the town of Camden, for all three towns, is about $100,000. Rockport had already set their budget priorities. Not that it is not important to Rockport, but they could not put that in their budget this year. So we have asked Volunteers of America to see if they can add us to their next round of grants. I have submitted my letters of support to them. They have applied for that grant, and what we are hoping is that we are going to receive a grant that we will be included, all three municipalities, along with the sheriff's office. We hope it's a fully funded grant, but if not, we have put $50,000 into our budget this year because it's not getting any better out there. And Audra has come up with a creative, you want to explain that?
But that expense will be offset with revenue from the town's trust funds. So it's a service that we can provide without impacting taxpayers.
What I don't want to do is go another year without services, because it's not just helping the police department. It's helping the general assistants. It's somebody to follow up with these people when they get out of the hospital, so they know that there is somebody out there that can put them in contact with services. You know, that's the other thing we'd like to do. And we've done it in Rockport. Volunteers of America has started their ride along. I've got an officer in Rockport who's been there 20 years. He knows everybody in need. And they've been going out and reaching out to these people to see if there's services that they can put them in contact with. One person didn't have any heat. Go ahead, Peter.
Real quick, Randy, and I appreciate that. And it's great information. And the part that I want you to take advantage of right now, or even later on when you do a newsletter or when you do some publicity and communication from your department, is we hear about grants, but we municipalities forget to kind of educate the public that, oh, the grant, either it lasts 10 years, it lasts 4 years, it lasts 1 year. What are the parameters of a grant? I'm not trying to put you on the spot right now, but
I don't have that answer.
of course not. But we really would love to support
Absolutely.
that
Absolutely.
when we learn more about it, because then we can see that, okay, we got to continue to invest this way,
Sure.
because 5 years from now, it's going to be different. Anyway, thank you.
Peter. Yep.
And I think just building on that, the only thing, circling back to the question of the staffing and creating a service level that was consistent with what was in the 90s doesn't mean that policing is the same today as it was in the 90s. So I guess my question is, if you've seen and are starting to see some of the success and between grants and budgets, do you look at and does it make sense to be increasing in the community liaison officer bucket versus having 3 additional foot officers on the ground to help offset what those needs are and how the policing goes. And again,
Absolutely.
I guess that's just my,
I can tell you that social media has made policing unbearable. We are dealing with people calling in complaints now because somebody has said something bad about them on Facebook. Every person who gets passed on Route 1 in the morning gets a call to dispatch. Erratic operation. I haven't got the slide up there. Our calls for service are up. There is more calls for us to do more things like bicycle patrol, lake patrol. I'm going to wear my people out working so much. I need to get back to that staffing level. I haven't asked for an increase, but I sure as hell don't want a decrease because I've been working at decreased staffing most of my career. It's great for a little while. I've worked as many as 3 officers down when I had 3 officers deployed to different parts of the world with the military. It works. If I didn't have the dedicated staff and wasn't able to delegate a lot of things that I need to do, I would never be able to do 2 police departments. I have great staff that I can put my faith in, and I know the job is done. I don't micromanage them because I don't need to. They know what the expectation of service is for both of these communities. They know how we want our citizens treated, and they know the type of service that we need to supply to those communities and those community members. I would love to say, yeah, we could probably, we're already working that. If we were to take one out and then we go down, we'd be that much further behind.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ray.
Yeah. Randy, on this community liaison officer, I'm very pleased with seeing that in there, but can you give us a perspective of, okay, with grants and everything, we might be 0 or whatever in the future, not this coming year, but in the future budgets, what could this grow into as far as do you see as how much money down the road each year this is going to cost us?
So what we did was we did a breakdown of the 3 communities. $100,000 is 33, 33, 33, 33 forever. So if you took 33,000, because what we would be doing is we would be having that person, they'd work a day here, day Rockport, day Rockland, and then they would be able to respond in any of the communities if needed. You know, we may look at partnering further with the sheriff's office. Like I said, I can't thank Sheriff Polkey and Sheriff Trundy for recognizing our need and giving us some of that time now. So maybe we get that responder, and who knows, we may find that it works so good that we need somebody else, but let's take what we can get right now. And if you kept 33,000 in your mind for next year, say we couldn't get any grant funding, hopefully by then all the communities could share in that. That's what we would be looking for.
Just to be very clear, we're paying for it with trust funds, and we're going to have the ability in the future to pay for it with trust funds as well.
Any online, I'm just looking at the screen behind Randy. Mary Beth or Will, do you guys have any questions?
Yes, I do. I'm an addictions really worked very closely. I was with the County Recovery Coalition when they started the recovery and the officer and all of that, and it is phenomenally effective, and it really makes a difference. And it's right now the opioid addiction problem is getting worse. It's not getting better. And this is where we should be putting our resources. And I strongly support a project like this because the bike officer is appealing, but this is to me, this is more practical. And I think it would have greater impact.
Mary Beth, can I use you for a reference for that when I go out to sell this program even further?
Yes, you can use me for a reference. I strongly believe this. I mean, VOA is amazing, and I partner with them all the time, and they're effective and they get things done. So I'm very pleased to hear about this.
I just want to say, if first impressions are anything, Stephen Brimley had no idea what he was walking into that day. Didn't faze him one bit. He jumped at it, he got the ball rolling, and I don't know where we would have been without the help. So I'm so
well, they're masters at de-escalating situations, which is 90% of the time. So it's really, I'm so pleased to hear about this.
And I find, I'm fortunate because I don't think I have a knack for dealing with people with mental health, but I wear plain clothes most of the time. What a difference that is. Because when they don't see the uniform, I have a badge. it seems to de-escalate that. And being able to work with somebody else who's a civilian in those situations really de-escalates that. Because the first thing somebody in crisis is going to think is the police are here and they're going to arrest me. We don't want that. You know, I can't say enough good things about it. I wish we could have got this going a lot sooner, but, you know, COVID changed a lot of things, and I think this is the one thing that's going to go in the right direction for us.
Yep.
It's been bounced around multiple times, and so I just want to sort of touch base on it a little bit. The bike patrol, I know that's a new thing.
Yep.
You said that the select board wants to put it in. Does that mean it has to happen this year? But I also heard you
So
say-
I'm down enough people that I would not be able to implement it this summer. But to get it going for the summer of 2024, I would need to make the purchases, get the equipment purchased, find out which officers are interested in taking that training. Give me time to get 3 officers hired and through the police academy. I know what's going to happen because Murphy's Law, they'll get hired by, say, June. They'll miss the December academy and they'll end up going to the academy in August of next year. So.
I guess, and my question too around that was, you also said in the beginning.
All right. You also said in the beginning that you were going to work about, was it having just one officer a day walking around on foot downtown?
To try to get somebody down there on a more consistent basis, Spencer's our new ticket officer. He's going to be in the downtown area. Now, he's not law enforcement. He's parking enforcement, but he's our eyes and ears downtown. He can first respond to stuff. He can be a great witness for us. And by giving him EMT training, somebody gets injured in the downtown, where in hopes it will be able to put a bag down there at one of the stores where if he needs it, he'll have access to it. I'm sure that any of the stores are going to let us do that. Just basic first aid stuff. We got firefighters that are EMT trained. I won't even get into ambulances because that's not my forte, but we all know that there are times that we need somebody there a little quicker that
And
can.
Will, I
render that.
see your hands raised. Thank you for the extra visual. I appreciate it. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I just felt rude and interjecting before, so I'm gonna do the raised hand strategy, if that's okay. Randy, if you get the grant, how would you treat this other, call it excess 50 grand?
I wouldn't ask for any of it. If we get grant funding to fund the whole thing, I would not be asking for any money from the trust fund. What I want is to have that ability that we can put this person, we know it's $100,000 to hire somebody for next year. So between Camden and Rockland, we would share that service and fund that position. So if we get grant funding under it, great. I mean, even they say it's 20,000, we'd pay the rest with that. And I'm looking at the screen, so so that would be my plan for that.
Okay.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
So back to the numbers again, and I think along your question. So I'm going to make an assumption here, just by quick math. It looks like this year, this department is going to be underspent by a couple $100,000. And again, I get the reason why. I mean, we're seeing that in terms of not just not being able to hire, but even just longer turnover times. We're seeing that underspending. There's a couple lines that are big increases: uniforms, training, bicycle patrol, small department equipment, all those that I understand the reasons why, and I support them. I'm a big fan of strategic budgeting to mitigate and minimize the increases to taxpayers. So given the underspending in this current year, are any of those budgeted items able to be purchased? Not the training, obviously, but can they be purchased? You know, the e-bikes aren't going to change that much in
You'll
a
have
year.
to ask my boss about
Well,
that.
well, that's kind of who I'm talking to. So, and again, I'm not.
You'd be amazed by how quickly the money goes in May.
This is a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, we're not
This
going to
department,
make up for the
and again, the
salary
reason why is
Oh, yeah, I mean,
unfortunate, but it is.
If you want to take that pot and put it into next year's, I don't care how you do it, as long as I can.
Well,
fund the
that's kind of where,
department.
that's why I'm more saying it for.
All I
the
need is the
thought.
boss to say, yes, spend this money now, and I can make
Well,
that work.
All I can do is
and I
make
guess
the,
it would come down to because this is sort of the first year that we've had new programs in the police department in a long time. It's been very, I would say, status quo for a while. It's been more like equipment. That's been sort of like a change as
Yeah,
opposed to
one of the big,
anything else.
one of the big ones in the equipment is I need to buy all new radars. I saw it, but that was, to me, that was an easy one to buy in June and not have it in the budget. The
That's
why I just wheeled that one out
When we're
there.
talking about like, a service level change, like having, going to bike patrols from one year to another, absolutely, we could use the money from this year to purchase those. But I'm not, I want to get consensus that this is something that the community wants. The budget committee's discussed it and you've said that you want to do it. The select board puts it on the ballot and everybody votes on it. So, we don't even have to, it's more of the discussion about, do you want the service and does everyone want to maintain the service?
So you may not be able to spend the money this
Definitely
year.
reduce the number, but it's more the conversation about, do you want to do it? And is this something everyone's going to commit to carrying forward?
I guess again, I'm not picking on bikes. I mean, it sounds like I'm picking on bikes, but I guess the question I have is, there's the purchase of the patrol, but then I guess has the assessment and like a budget evaluation been done of like, does insurance change because the liability of someone getting injured on a bike versus in a patrol car? Like, is there like a trickle of like all other places that like,
I think it stays the
might, or
same
like
under our
if all the
liability
officers don't
insurance, but I'm
want to
not
do
the-
on the bike? Like, I'm just trying to like think of like what else might be impacted or.
Well, I believe this, that in order for our insurance company to take that, they would have to go through the proper training, be properly equipped and whatnot. So I don't know if that's a difference in our liability insurance by taking that on or not.
So property and casualty, there'll be a little bit of an impact because we have more equipment, some more things to insure. It's usually quite minimal, even when it's, like a big fire truck or a big, huge piece of equipment. I would say that probably our biggest exposure in terms of insurance and thinking forward into the future are some of the unanticipated from like workers' comp claims that it's hard to anticipate, but it's good to talk about and for everybody to know about them because, when you are asking people to be out on bicycles, there's inherently some risk to it. So
I guess sorry, let me turn, do you have a question?
That's just, something that I was concerned about. Putting bicycles on Main Street or downtown Camden in the summertime, I think you're asking for trouble. I think you're going to have accidents even when people are overly cautious on their bikes. There's going to be people not paying attention to the biker, especially in the traffic chaos that we have at the intersection up here by Stop and Go and the one by Hannaford. I think it's a danger signal to me.
And again, now I'm just.
So I have not looked at bicycles until Audra brought it up to me. If it's a goal of the select board and they want bicycle patrol out there, I'm more than happy to do it. We just need to make sure that it's properly funded. It's properly equipped. The officers are properly trained. If it was as easy as just buying a 10-speed at Walmart and throwing them out there, we could, but we just can't do that. Liability wise, it's.
And
it's a
again,
lot.
I don't want to knock, I guess my question is, it's like, what's the community impact? I guess this is where I'm hedging of, you've seen the community impact of having additional training for de-escalation. You've seen community impact for having more hours spent on trying to, be more of that liaison. I'm just trying to picture, is it because, and again, I'm so sorry for those that are believing in it, but I just feel like, what is a Camden officer on a bike other than like, oh, look, there's a Camden officer on the bike? Like, what is that going to do to better service our community?
I can tell you that foot shift is greatly appreciated by the downtown merchants, having an officer down there on foot. As you saw, we had over 100 foot shifts that were more than that last year. Sneakers are a heck of a lot cheaper than
I
bicycles.
was going to say, but yeah, what does the bike do? Yeah.
If it's a goal that the select board want, I'm happy to do it. I just need the funding to be able to put it together.
I did have a question. I can't remember if you said this or not. What, I know obviously you can get there faster on a bike, but what are you expecting the parameters to be of, or have you not even gone that far into it yet?
Well, if you're on a regular 18-speed mountain bike, you're pretty much to the downtown area because your response time going up any of these hills. If you were to get an electric bike, you probably could, up to Village Variety. And we used to have a downtown patrol area, which was Lime Rock Street, back around, over around the harbor, and then back around. That basically would be that patrol area. I don't see bicycle officers responding to accidents. They can. One of the things with a cruiser is it's a safety barrier at an accident scene.
I think what would be,
I have to
I'm so sorry.
go in with Karen here, and I know you're in a position where if the select board wants it, that's pretty much what you're feeling you have to do. But I'm really concerned about those officers going through the traffic of downtown Camden with car doors opening, people crossing when they shouldn't be crossing. It's like adding one more piece of gum on the sidewalk. It worries me.
I would like,
concerns.
I would like to end the conversation. I would like to move that we approve the budget minus the 17,000. What was the bike one? 16,000, right? Minus the $16,000, so it would be a budget of $1,687,150.
Do I have a second? Many seconds. Okay.
I like the idea of the bikes. I would just rather like to see the police department get fully staffed and then do it.
How about a
I think
horse?
it's a great idea, but-
Yeah. And will you have your, no, sorry, Courtney. Go ahead. Will you have your hand up and then?
Go forward with the vote. It's, my only question was looking at it in a little bit different way than you all have with the bike, was to say, Randy, what, when you're, like, I guess, in your management style, you have all, there's various calls, you have these officers, where, and I guess, in deciding, bike officer, or, I don't know what to classify a non-bike officer, a traditional officer that's in a vehicle, but I guess, if you're thinking, okay, I've got various calls, I've got this percentage of calls, just like, where do you feel like your holes are? And would any one of those holes be able to be met with a bike officer?
Well, there is always the desire to have somebody down on foot or down in the downtown area. Let me say that. Of course, the call volume goes up during the summer, so sometimes that's harder to get somebody. That's why I want to take Spencer, the ticket officer, and at least have 5 days a week that he's going to be in that downtown area to respond immediately. So that part is taken care of. Day staff and afternoon staff, along with the sergeants, routinely will go walk a beat downtown. We've usually got overlapping staff, so somebody can start to a complaint. So no, I don't see it as having the holes there that we need to cover. I think we can adequately do it as long as we've got all the positions filled.
So do you think, does this make any logic if having a bike officer or a pedestrian officer, could they handle more of the low risk or low, I don't know how to classify, when you get a call, how.
Well, a lot of stuff that happens in the downtown area during the summer is people that need directions. We don't have, fortunately, knock on wood, our shoplifting isn't skyrocketing, but if you look around the country, those things are changing. So yeah, I mean, they handle those. If it comes to physical arrest, you need an officer that's in a cruiser that if we need to make transport, we can put them in a petitioned cruiser. So we usually have enough overlapping staff so we can accommodate that.
So before we hold a vote on it, is it fair to say that you can be creative with the foot officer idea in increasing that, or using a mechanism of being on foot to accomplish what would potentially be tried to be accomplished with bikes. And I want to move for a vote because we have a motion on the
So
floor.
yes, that's basically what
Okay.
I have already started to plan.
Okay.
With the addition of using our ticket officer during the day.
Okay.
So I'd like to make an amendment to the
Yes,
motion.
yes.
To further reduce the budget by an additional $11,000 for a total budget of $1,676,150. And the reason is, it's not the bikes, because I actually really support that idea, but the select board can fund that if it ever happens, is the additional money in the small department equipment for the radar guns of $10,000. I think could be purchased this year. That would be my, I'm making an amendment. And so 10,000, so this is where I would identify the money. I'm not sure where you would actually
As
take
long
it
as you
from.
promise my boss will say yes.
10,000 from there, and then honestly, the $1,000 for part-time wages, which is kind of a rounding error, and given the market for employees, I'm thinking the money can come from somewhere else, from other lines. So that's where I got $11,000. That's my motion.
Do you have a second?
I'll second the amendment, yes.
Just to make sure that I understood it, is the motion that we are eliminating the bike officer?
Correct.
Bike patrol.
Public patrol.
Just the fund.
Just funding the bikes.
Just funding the actual bikes,
Yes.
not the officer?
Right. No, right. This is funding. Yeah, this is just funding the bicycles that would have to be purchased to support a future fleet.
I might need an extra $2,000 for sneakers, but
Yeah.
we'll find that somewhere.
Go ahead, Ray.
Vote on the amendment
Yes.
first. Right.
So so all in favor of the amendment that was proposed for $1,676,000, 150. Yeah, $150. And we'll start with this room. All in favor? Going online to Will Addis and Mary Beth Thomas.
Yes.
Okay.
Public safety dispatch. Was that-
Okay.
Do you want to do dispatch?
So just, can I chime in, just to be clear, what happened in the budget, we zeroed out part-time wages of $1,000. We reduced the small department equipment by $10,000, and we removed the $16,000 bicycle.
Correct.
Actually,
More
I,
sneakers.
No,
I
hey, this
appreciate-
is the perfect group to have this conversation with.
I
This is
appreciate-
exactly why we bring these things to the budget committee, because, you're the ones who are going to be the people using this service or not. So you need to make the decisions on what we commit to long-term.
I can live with this. I appreciate the fact that the $50,000, even though it's coming out of the trust funds, none of you blinked an eye because you understand the importance of that. So thank you for that. If you want to do the public safety dispatch,
I'm going to do a preemptive. We started a half hour early, thinking we're going strong. Is everybody okay if we go past 8 o'clock in terms of new budgets because of how much time? Okay. All right.
So we're probably not gonna get to big stuff that we didn't do last week. Does that sound accurate?
I'm going to noodle on that while we do public. Yes, I'm being cognizant of it. Yes.
so public safety dispatch,
Yes. So that is on page 12.
that is the fee that the Knox County Regional Communications Center assesses us each year. And that is $190,650. I don't think we get a lot of say in it unless we don't want dispatch services. So none.
Do I hear a second? Hear a second. So in the room, all in favor? And then moving online, Will Addis
Yes.
and Mary Beth Thomas.
Yes.
That was record breaking for this budget season. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All right.
So if I could suggest something.
Yeah.
You may want to finalize, if Dave is still here, Dave St. Laurent's budget, because I think you could get
Yeah.
through them pretty quickly.
Yeah.
If he's
that's-
still here.
Yeah. So Chief Farley, if you can just hang with us, the budget's, We could, so the outstanding budgets, just to circle back from last week, we have streetlights, parking lots, tree programs, and dams, which we could, depending upon the number of questions we have, look at those numbers and do a vote, obviously with an opportunity for questions. Does everybody want to do that? And then we will move on to fire. What's that?
I think Dave is assumed he wasn't going to go
Oh,
tonight.
okay, so he's not even on.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
so there's not even, okay, so Chief Farley then, right?
Yes.
Welcome. Thank you for bearing with. Why do you, he said he didn't even drop off, so. It has to just be on the, you have to start the presentation by 8. It doesn't, you have to not conclude.
Still doesn't take away from the fact that Randy took an hour. And I knew he could do it. I'm going to give a plug first. The Camden, Rockport, and Rockland Fire Departments are partnering with the American Red Cross to provide free smoke detectors. So it's a program the Red Cross is doing. So if anybody needs smoke detectors, redcross.org, and you can sign up. They have a canvassing day on April 1st. So if anybody needs smoke detectors, also plug that we got a call at the fire station today asking for, do I have to wait till April 1st? And the answer to that is no. We're going to be installing smoke detectors in somebody's house this weekend because a couple of years ago, the Camden Rotary gave Camden and Rockport Fire Departments money to go buy smoke detectors. So please, these people that called today don't have any in their house. There's just no reason not to have smoke detectors in your homes.
Oh, sure.
About the smoke detectors. If you're a little old lady like me and live alone and you have smoke detectors to change and have to climb a ladder, will the fire department come up and do it for you?
Call Margaret. Of course, Karen. We do it and we've done it. 236-7950. Just give us a call.
And this is page 13 for reference if you haven't found it.
I do, do you guys ever do carbon monoxide or like gas detector things too, or is it just smoke?
So yeah, we would.
would.
We would. If somebody had gas appliances in their home, you needed a detector and you couldn't get one another way, absolutely. The Rotary would be fine with that. Yep.
All you.
All me? Well, here we are. I'll just quickly go through the slideshow there. That's just a bunch of stuff we did last year. If Jody could move on to the next page, shows a summary of our incidents for last year. 386 is the total that you can't see down the bottom. Was our total number of incidents for last year. I was just looking because today, January 1st through today, we're at 104 incidents. And the first quarter last year, we were 86. So we're already above last year. And that's just trending. And we're not even responding to EMS calls yet. So that's just going to go up. The days of the week, that just shows that, there's pretty much an even distribution, although 2022, Sundays was a busy day, or 2021, Sundays were a busy day. Tuesdays were a slow day last year in 2022. Just interesting to watch that go. And that's by hour of the day. As you can see, the highlighted area, we strive to have the station staffed 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. with 2 people. One of the reasons why we try to have 2 people is because we just have fewer call firefighters. Just an example of that is yesterday we had a fire alarm at Rennie's around noontime, and it was myself, the duty firefighter, and one of the career firefighters came back, and we have two two freshmen at the high school who are junior firefighters, and it was no school yesterday, so they're hanging around the firehouse. So that's what it was the five of us. We had no on-call firefighters come to the call, and that's a trend that's just going. That's the way it is. So that's why we try to have the building staffed 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. That's the busiest times, as you can see. And I prefer to have two people there, and so that somebody's not going out to ourselves. I typically just show the big event of the previous year. Last year was our trip to Belfast. Nobody, even Bob Oxting, can't ever recall Camden going to Belfast before. And I know I helped out Chief Richards there with some things, and he got some feedback from some Waldo County fire chiefs. They were like, "Why did you let the Camden fire chief do that for you?" But that's just the way it is. We're all there's no fire department in Knox County that can handle a fire without our mutual aid assistance. It's just that's the way we do business now. So again, that was just the big. We were in Belfast twice for that. So I talked a little bit about our staffing. We have myself and Andrew Lowe is the assistant chief. We work opposite shifts, so we work 4 days on, 4 days off. So we try to have it so Andrew or I are always around, along with Matt Heath. Matt is recently became a licensed paramedic, and then Jack Arrest is the other one. The firefighters are all either licensed EMS personnel or code enforcement. Several years ago, we jumped into the code enforcement and to help out the planning office, and so we're all doing that as well. I always hate to put a number on the number of on-call firefighters we have because it fluctuates and it changes from day to day, but I can kind of say 17 today. So we adjusted wages so it reflects what's going on in other communities for the call firefighters. And as part of our EMS responses, we are going to implement an on-call pager pay, so to speak, for somebody who's on call for the 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. timeframe. So again, we're implemented several years ago. The 4 towns, Camden, Rockport, Lincolnville, and Hope, implemented or had a EMS review. One of the recommendations from that was for the fire departments to start a first responder program. So 2020, some of the folks started their first class, and we're just now credit to them all for taking the class and finishing it out and getting licensed. Because we're just now going to start the program later this month. We applied to the state for our non-transporting first responder agency license back in the summer. We just got our license approved at the beginning of the month. So it's like a 8-month torturous process. But we finally have things in place. We have agreements with the hospital and work things out with Northeast, our transporting agency, so that things are all in place, and we should be ready to go by the end of next week. Starting to first respond to EMS calls. And what we said we're going to do is start to just respond to the most acute calls. So somebody calls 911 and asks for an ambulance. The person on the other end, the dispatcher, asks a series of questions, and the severity of the call gets graded on a scale of A, B, C, D, E. And so what we proposed initially was to just respond to the most acute calls, the C, D, and E, which is what we're going to do. But for several months, we're going to respond to all the calls. So the A, B, C, D, and E's. So that way, because our people have the education and have the licenses, but they don't have the experience. So this way we can get them with the experience before they really start jumping in. So
Doing that with Northeast as well, so like Northeast will be going in at the same time as EMS.
absolutely. So when a call goes out for an ambulance, it'll be the dispatch center will send the Northeast and the fire department at the same time. Yep.
Do you anticipate there being an impact just in terms of, like, because, getting people to show up and like the staffing and the volunteers, like do you anticipate with there being calls for both EMS and fire that might impact fire response, or how many, will that change ultimately the long-term staffing, or too soon to tell?
Yeah, it's definitely going to have an impact on long-term staffing. We're going to need to look at a bunch of things. I mean, ideally, we'd be doing this with several other communities, and we wouldn't be taking this on our own. Because, yeah, eventually it's going to have an impact, and we're going to have more full-time staff. But again, ideally, in my world, we'd be doing it cooperatively with other communities. So some of the things that we did currently, there's a picture coming up, but we replaced engine 6, which was a 1980 truck with a new mini pumper, which was delivered in December. That's going to be basically our workhorse. It gets used pretty much every day by the full-time people, as well as that will be our EMS first response vehicle. We replaced the pickup truck that we had. There was previously saw service in the police department. So this is our new pickup truck. It's all electric. And we've had it since the end of October. And I have just good things to say about it. In terms of it operating in the wintertime, it's the smoothest riding, most stable pickup that I've been in. It has in the snow and the slush of the last couple of days, it's like a little tank. I've had no issues with it whatsoever. We developed a preventive maintenance program because some of our trucks are getting older. Some of them our primary engine is 10 years old. The secondary engine is approaching 25 years old, and the ladder truck was a 1995. It was purchased by the town, for the town by MBNA. So we're just making sure that we've developed a better preventive maintenance program so that we're having those trucks serviced by an outside contractor just to extend the life of those. And then the implementation of the EMS program. So the EMS is kind of taking us back to where Alan Payson brought the fire department, started a ambulance service back after the end of World War II. So we're just kind of going back to that point. A fair number of our calls in the summertime are in the state park for people that are hiking or lost or injured. And so we've been working with the park staff on a number of projects. If you go hiking in the park, you'll now see that the trails are all color coded and the symbols, so that when somebody gets lost, instead of everything just being blue blazes, there are color-coded and symbolized trailblazes. A couple times last year, we were able to find somebody easily because they were just able to say, I can see a purple star. So we were able to know just which trail that they were on. And the other thing that we're doing is we've been working with Sunshine Hood, the park manager. She is awesome. We worked with her, and we were able to get a UTV that will be up in the park that we'll be able to use for incidents in the park. And hopefully we'll be able to work that out. So if we need it somewhere else like Ragged Mountain, that we'll be able to transport the UTV over there as well. We need to, like Randy said, some of the things that are changing in the police department. One of the things, and with taking on EMS and more full-time people, we really need to take a look at the building. The police department moved down in 2003, and we need to take a look at the building and if it's meeting our needs today. If we need to start having people, if we need to start having firefighters in the building overnight, there's no accommodations in the building for overnight lodging. So we're going to need to take a look at that and see where the building needs to go. We continue to work with the EMS. Like I said, the review committee said that we should be working with Rockport, Lincolnville, and Hope to do the first responder agency with one of us being the primary lead on it and getting the agency license. So we've done that. Just today, working with Lincolnville and Hope is a challenge just in terms of getting to sit down and meet with the fire chiefs there because they both have other full-time jobs. I tried to meet with Chief Keller today. It was his day off. So I went up to the Hope Corner Station and we sat down, we talked for about 10 minutes and he got called to Appleton. So that was the end of that conversation. And I've been trying to set this meeting up for months now. And so it's just one of the challenges. But we continue to work on that. And Chief Fullington wasn't able to make the meeting today. This is his busy season. So it's just a challenge sometimes to meet with those folks, but we continue to work on it. So.
Questions?
Yeah, quick question. On the item there on vehicle repairs, you budgeted about double or the amount of what you spent in any 2 consecutive years. Is that just because of the aging fleet or is there something else we should read in there?
That is because of the aging fleet, but there's also a specific item that needs to be repaired on engine 5, which is a 1997 truck. So one of the things that we started having the outside contractor look at the trucks this year, and one of the things that he noticed was that the tank cradle that holds the 1,000 gallons of water into the frame of the truck is corroded, and it needs to be replaced.
Same question.
Oh, there's my microphone.
Same question, I guess, then with Randy can that be pushed into this year because it looks like you're underspending your budget too?
So it does look that way. So what we always do is the first part of the year is we spend the summer and the fall on maintenance items. So we do, all the hose needs to be tested every year. The SCBA needs to be flow tested. We do that every summer. And then we work on the trucks in September and October. And this year it was like one thing after another with maintenance on apparatus. It felt like we were traveling somewhere to drop them off to Vassalboro every other day. So we focus on the maintenance items the first half of the year, and second half of the year, the projects that we wanted to do in terms of purchasing equipment. So we're just now starting to get into that.
I just have a comment. I'm amazed that you do this with 4 full-time staff. I think Randy said he had 11. The library had 10. And I'm just, hats off. And the other thing I would just, at some point, it looks like with the part-time wages, that seems to cover, that just covers your full-time vacations and 6 days, I'm sure, and the overtime. At some point, it would make sense, I think, to look into having a 5th full-time person to kind of cover that instead of paying overtime. Just a comment.
No argument from this person.
I mean, he could probably use more than.
Right, but I mean, but at some point, it's cheaper to bring somebody on full-time than it is to pay the extra, higher rates or for overtime rates.
Not even gonna tell you how many hours I worked this week.
I'd make a motion that we approve the budget for $747,900.
Before anybody seconds it, I just see that Will has a hand up on the screen, so just want to give him a chance.
Thank you. I had a question. I have just a personal experience. I lived out on Nantucket for a number of years, and there's a high concentration of PFAs, as well as high concentration of PFAs in the equipment that firefighters wear, as well as the exposure to the foam that you all use to put out fires. My question is really, and by means of that, I've had a couple friends that have suffered cancer from the exposure to these PFAs, and I know there's an ongoing kind of lobbying to upgrade the gear so that we don't have firefighters or frontline suffering from toxic exposure. So I'm just curious if that's anything that we've thought about, and if so, what are we doing in that area to help protect our firefighters?
Will, you're really helping up my recruitment. None of the foam, we only have Class A foam, and none of that foam has any of the PFAs in it. And it is definitely something that the industry is trying to do, is phase out of the turnout gear.
Okay, so our current gear is something that we may need to see, an upgrade in that, I don't know anything about firefighter gear, so, but it may be that there's future gear that does not have concentrations of PFAS in them. Is that a future world that you may see, or, I know it's not in this budget, but is that something that we could be thinking about in the future?
The vast majority of our active firefighters have gear that has been purchased within the last 5 years. So it's as new in terms of what is available for materials and technology as possible. And we certainly keep watching what the industry is doing to keep ahead of that.
And I know there's been a motion for the budget. I do have one last question before I ask about a second. If the EMS program takes off and it does throw a big whirlwind of, how your response team can and needs to reply, is there something built into here or a way that if you do have to, have an additional staffing, again, you can only have as much foresight as you think, but is there enough built in here that if you realize this is not going to sustain for the year, that something can pivot or,
Well, there's just to be clear, there's additional funding for that and the EMS portion of the budget.
oh yeah, I assume that those calls are getting covered by that budget, but in terms of as it impacts potentially the fire and rescue, the fire department, and if it does take off so I guess the question is it's a wait and see and then see how the staffing needs are.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of been what our approach is, but we can kind of we can predict the number of EMS, and that's where we got those wages from, the EMS portion. We can predict the number of EMS calls based on Northeast calls, and we can predict what that number is going to be for us.
But I would say this is going to be FY24 will be the first full year of that program operating. So, there is going to be trial and error and having to readjust things, particularly in FY25.
So Peter had made a motion, correct, to approve the budget. I'm just reading, and then do I have a second?
I will second the motion.
Okay, so in the room, we'll do our call first. All in favor? Okay, and going online, Will Addis
Yes.
and Mary Beth Thomas.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to acknowledge Peter's comment, and with the same with Randy. We couldn't do it without the dedicated people that we have, both the career people and our on-call firefighters are some pretty good folks.
You all just proved you all like fire together, please. It's less to love.
So we're at 8:20. Can we proceed? Is everybody okay what would come next? We would do the public safety building?
Yes.
We good to continue on? Okay, no anarchy, okay.
The only change in the public safety building is we took away the part-time wages, which was basically to clean the building and put in some, to do some contractual services. And that's basically come in and do the floors once a year. The Randy's ticket person cleans the police department side of the building, and we clean our side of the building.
I feel like we need to get the cleaning services all on the same page and do another whole revamp, but that's not for this budget. Like, as Courtney had said, like, let's just curate all the cleaning and just, So any questions related to the public safety building?
No, I move that we approve the $48,000 for the public safety building.
Perfect. Great. In the room, all in favor? Unanimous. And going online, oh, we lost Will. So Mary Beth. Oh, no, there you are. There you are.
Yes.
Okay, Mary Beth's a yes.
Yes.
Will's a yes. Will? Okay, look at that. Okay, continuing on, right? We're on a streak. Hydrant rental.
I don't think that's debatable.
Yeah, so just so you know, with that, Maine Water has told us there's going to be a 3.5%, or they said really 3.4, but 3.5 is kind of how it rounded out in the budget to their rates. So that's what is the driving force behind increases to that line.
Yeah, I think
Second.
Andy seconds. All in favor? Okay, online, Mary Beth Thomas, say. Yeah, I need okay, her hand is up, but maybe we need you to say.
Yes.
Okay, Will Addis. He's frozen.
For Randy's sake,
Okay.
I don't like the water company. I would like the water company less than police.
If Will freezes, we can update the recording if he agrees, but we're. Oh, he did. Okay. Okay. Now timing for EMS. What's our?
I mean, I think Chief Farley.
I think we're
went
gonna
over
keep
a lot
going.
of
Are we
it,
still
so-
good? We're just going with it. Chief Farley, you're on again.
So again, this is a first responder wages for the EMS folks to first respond to EMS calls. And then we have the contract for Northeast Mobile Health.
The one question I have on here, promise it's not gonna be a long one, is for these training wages, obviously for the actual EMS training, does it factor in any of the type of training, de-escalation, things that Randy's budget, I mean, are there components of training that tie to some of what those response calls are? Hi. I didn't know if that factors in, or it may not be. I just didn't know if that's part of
EMT training.
EMT training.
It is part of EMT training, but we also, part of the first thing we educate people is scene safe. We don't want anybody going in until the scene is safe, right? And typically, we always invite the police department along.
Okay. So they're still
And
gonna
really,
be on
that's
the front line of
kind of be
that.
there. If it's a volatile situation, we're going to stay out until the police department says.
Any
Obviously, we're going to work with them on de-escalating it.
Any questions? Is there a motion?
I move that we accept the town manager's recommended budget for the emergency medical services.
I second.
Okay, okay. All in favor? And then going online, Mary Beth Thomas?
Yes.
And Will, you're unfrozen, so yay, we can get you on record. Okay, great.
He said it twice. We said it for the last one.
He did. So, and then, okay, Emergency Operations Center.
I think that's gone. I think we moved that into the public
Oh.
safety building.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nothing there.
Nothing there. Yeah, we moved that into the public safety building.
So we have officially covered everything that you intended to cover.
You want to do the street lights right
No,
now?
street lights as well. We missed street lights last week. That'll be our, do we want to do a review? Do we want to do a quick overview of those before we adjourn?
How long would it take?
I don't think it's
I don't
going to
think
take
it's
that
gonna
long.
take, no, let's do it. Let's finish it
Yeah,
up.
I can
Yeah.
answer any street
Okay.
related questions you may have.
So just for reference, street lights and is on, it's the only page I didn't pre-write. So but that's actually, it's on 16. We're already on that. Any questions about street lights?
Just like
Oh.
to know why-
Ray just, yeah, there you go.
Sorry.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Peter.
I'd just like to know, the electricity, we're doubling up from last year's budget. Just cost of electricity. Is there anything else factored in there?
Cost of electricity. So, I think a lot of you know about how we did the project to, purchase our own streetlights from CMP because it used to be like a lease agreement with them and then convert them all over to LEDs. And, there had been cost savings not to, quite a lot of the cost savings wasn't in the actual electricity. It was in not paying the lease to CMP anymore for the streetlights. And now it's just, purely escalations in electricity costs that we're seeing that's driving the increase.
I move that we approve the $38,000 for the streetlight.
All in favor in the room? Sorry, and then online, one more time, Mary Beth Thomas?
Yes.
And Will Adams?
Yes.
Okay, streetlights it is. Okay, so Chief Farley, thank you so much. So now again, we are 8:30. We have remaining from last week, oh, sorry, Ray, go ahead.
I just want to say one thing is that both to Randy and Chris, as a member of the Camden community, I just appreciate everything that they and their departments do, really. I have never heard a single complaint about either department in the 16 years I've been here. No, I don't know your wife.
So are we, yeah, go ahead. Hey, and Budget Committee brought Andy to being interested in volunteer, yes, or on call. So are we, again, so are we ready to call the meeting to be adjourned? And, or does anybody want to, or are we feeling like streets and park, how's everybody doing? Okay, so do I have a motion to adjourn? Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Good night, everyone.